Hi everybody, I'm going to be doing my comic reviews from my pull list for the past few weeks. It's going to be a quick fire review video purely because I haven't got a little battery left and just want to get this video out there. So without further ado, we have Amazing X-Men issue 5, Jason Aaron on the writing, Ed McGuinness on the art, Dexter Vines on the inking, and Mate Garcia on the colouring. Another fantastic issue with our X-Men facing off against the Demon Pirates, which are being led by Azazel, Nightcrawler's father. And there's a really great scene where Nightcrawler actually manages to confront Azazel, especially in regards to the fact that he's not his father's son, he never was, and he never will be. He's his own man. And you also get the end of the issue, you find out that a certain someone appears in order to try to convince Kurt to come back to paradise or back to heaven, but unfortunately you get the sealing of the deal between Nightcrawler and the Bamps that he made in order to A, transport his friends to the afterlife, and also to come back to life himself anyway, which will then segue into Nightcrawler's own ongoing series, which has just come out this past week with the first issue. And there's a really great conversation between Logan and Kurt at the end in terms of the fact that Kurt feels that while he was in heaven, all that he dreamt about was obviously coming back and having one last adventure with his friends. But at the same time, he also reminisces over the fact that what this might have cost him, in the respect that he might not be able to return to paradise. And you also get at the very end of the issue, as Nightcrawler is sitting on the School of the Jean Grey School for Higher Learning, you get the reveal of what the actual cost was to Kurt in order for him to come back to life. Just another fantastic issue of the series, and if you've been following the series, or if you're a fan of Jason Aaron, the X-Men, or if you're looking for an X-Men book to get into, which is very new reader friendly, then I definitely recommend Amazing X-Men. Next up we have All New X Factor issues 4 and 5, Peter David on the writing, Karen DJ Menko on the artwork, and Rachel Rosenberg is on board as a guest colorist for this issue, or for this month anyway. And we have Danger confronting our members of X Factor, which are Gambit, Quicksilver and Polaris, over the fact that she has been held captive recently by Nil, who is one of the members of the Thieves Guild, which Gambit is actually now the chief of. So there's some really great action scenes as our members of X Factor go up against Danger and seemingly try to stop her and to get her to come back to her senses. Some really great character defining moments, especially for Gambit and Polaris, especially in terms of how powerful Polaris is, especially when she gets annoyed and when somebody manages to get on her bad side, which is tantamount to a death sentence according to Gambit's inner monologue. And you then have basically at the end of the issue you have a really interesting relationship starting to develop between both Gambit and Danger. They've never been romantically involved, but there's a start of, for me anyway, I think it's a really interesting relationship, and I'm going to be interested to see where it goes. And you then have Danger actually being inducted into the X Factor team, by Gambit at the end of the issue, which then segues into issue 5. Another fantastic issue by Peter David and the creative team on this book, which then issue 5 actually picks up right after the events of the fourth issue, with Danger actually coming to Gambit for guidance in terms of sort of returning to her former self, and to basically Peter David actually starts to actually put some more development on the relationship between these two characters. At the same time, you have some really great banter back and forth between Lorna, Pietro and Gambit, or Remy, as obviously Polaris wonders if Danger is actually interested in Gambit in a couple sense, but there's some great one-liners, especially from Pietro, just being just the sort of the douchebag of the three, if you will. But yeah, and Danger also proves to be perhaps more trouble than she's worth, especially when she confronts both Pietro and Linda in several industries, and also when she confronts Lemar Smaug, who is a businessman that Alison Snow wants to impress by showcasing the members of X Factor to him, and it's actually revealed that he's actually the Magnus, which is the father of Warlock. So at the end of the issue, we have Warlock actually making an appearance, and then it segues into the cliffhanger for issue number 6, which will be the end of the first arc and the end of the first trade. Another 2 fantastic issues by Peter David in terms of the writing and the storytelling, as well as equally on-par artwork and colouring from Rachel Rosenberg and Lee Lowfridge, and also Carmine Digiamenco's artwork as well. If you've been following the series, or if you're a fan of Peter David, or if you're looking for a really fantastic self-contained X-Men book, definitely recommend Owner X Factor. Magneto number 2, Colin Bunn on the writing, Gabriel Hernandez-Water on the art, and Jordie Bellaire on the colouring. And this is Magneto basically following up on the lead that he got at the end of the first issue, in terms of the unwitting Omega Sentinel. And you see Magneto go into a community in Down Acres, which is a makeshift community of people in this sort of campsite, if you will. And you start to see that Magneto may be starting to relate and start to sympathise with humans, even though for years he's been the figurehead of obviously Homo superiors ruling the planet, as opposed to being hunted and feared by Homo sapiens, which are obviously mutants to humans. And you also get a parallel between the goings-on in Down Acres and Magneto's own experiences during World War II in Nazi-occupied Germany, and also due to the fact that Magneto was and still is Jewish. So you also see the tribulations that he had to go through during that time period, and especially which the flashback that we get treated to actually takes a turn for the worse, which I won't reveal what happens, but Magneto believes that this happened back then due to the fact that he is going to change the course of history, and he's going to basically ensure that his people or mutants are not hunted or persecuted any longer. And even though his powers have been dampened since the events of Avengers vs. X-Men, he's still more than capable of dealing out some really gruesome and really efficient punishment to some individuals who come to Down Acres to basically recruit more people. Another fantastic issue by the creative team on this book, and if you've been following the series from the first issue, or if you're looking for a really fantastic solo X-Men title to get into, or if you're just a fan of Magneto in general, definitely recommend Magneto as a series. Speaking of another series I recommend, if you're a fan of the character, or if you're looking to get into the character, is Moon Knight number 2. Warren Ellis on the writing, Declan Shalvey on the art, and Jordie Bellaire on the colouring. In this particular issue, we see Moon Knight actually get his traditional costume back, but before that we get treated to the members of this banking corporation, who seem, if anything, bored by their lives, really. At least that's the impression I got from Warren Ellis's script whilst reading the issue. They just seem, like I said, just really bored. In fact, one of them even says that the people that he is helping out with a financial problem in terms of the accountancy for the bank, he even makes a comment that the people that he sort of is working for at the moment, they don't pay him. The people that pay them actually pay him. So he's quite sort of arrogant in the respect that he's sort of saying, I don't answer to you, I answer to your superiors. So there's that side of it as well. At the same time, you have members of this banking corporation being picked off by a lone sniper, which is then seemingly confronted by Moon Knight or Mark Spector. And as you can see, you have Moon Knight actually getting his traditional costume back, which is the hood and cape, as you can see there. Really interesting issue, because it's actually it could be a little bit allegorical or commenting on the fact that Moon Knight was once an answer to Batman, obviously from Marvel to DC. But to be honest, I don't see the similarities, and I don't judge the two characters as sort of as the same sort of mold, if you will. For one thing, Mark Spector doesn't seem the brooding type, and Mark Spector's 10 times more crazy than Bruce Wayne, to be perfectly honest. But there's some really great action scenes, some great fight scenes between Moon Knight and the lone sniper as he manages to take him down. And there's also some potential and possible commentary from Warren Ellis in terms of the banks always win, in terms of their foreclosure policies. I'll leave a link to to an article from the New York Times from a few years ago, which might help you to get some sort of some perspective on the possible commentary that Warren Ellis is making. I don't know, maybe I'm just reading too much into it. But just another fantastic issue for Moon Knight, especially in terms of, as I said, Warren Ellis' writing and storytelling, Declan Shalvey's art, and Jordie Bella's colouring. So if you're a fan of Moon Knight, or if you've been looking to get into Moon Knight as a character, pick up the first issue and then pick up issue 2. Uncanny Avengers, issue 17, recommender on the writing. Steve McNiven's last issue, or at least the final issue for this arc, as the artist, and Jay Leaston on the inking, along with Laura Martin on the colouring, and also some others. Justin Ponsor amongst them, and a few more. And you see the heroes of Earth basically trying to halt the Celestial Executioner Exitar's descent onto Earth, and this is the conclusion of the Ragnarok Now storyline, which we actually have Thor still battling against Enim, who is the female of the Apocalypse Twins, and you have Janet also still managing to confront Grim Reaper as well, who is one of the Apocalypse Twins acolytes. Speaking of more kinetic action and great fight scenes, there's a really great battle between both Enim and Thor. At the same time, you have Grim Reaper managing to try to convince Wasp to break a code of ethics and to kill him in order to save the Earth, but she's saved by a timely kick from Captain America or Steve Rogers as he goes up against Grim Reaper, as she tries to basically destroy the Tachyon Dam, or the Tachyon Dam rather, however you pronounce it, and basically pave the way for Immortus and his band of heroes to save the day. Now, I'm spoiling this issue purely because of the fact that since the first superhero comic, really, it's always been about the good guys always win against the bad guys, or good always triumphs over evil. But this is what happens when the heroes fail. And this is the failure of, obviously, Thor in a big way in this issue, and the rest of the heroes as well. And there's a really great moment of Thor actually being counselled by Odin, in the respect that Odin even says that Ragnarok, or the destruction of Earth, was humanity's choice, because humanity had never united and never become sort of as one people, but they've always been sort of reverting to the tribal instincts and disputing with each other, even amongst the superhero community as well as the sort of regular Joes as well. But just a really great moment, and just shows how wise and how sort of just how wise and how in tune Odin is with humans, even though the people of Asgard, or the gods of Asgard rather, see themselves as superior beings. But in their respect, there's still an aspect of humanity even to them, and especially in Thor, to his reaction to in terms of the destruction of Midgard, or Earth, which is a planet or a place that he loves most dearly. But unfortunately, the Celestial Executioners, by way of the Apocalypse Twins, have taken that from him, which then segues into issue 18 point now, which is Avenge the Earth Part 1, which is the new jumping on point, which sees the return of Daniel Lacuna on the artwork. And you have Havoc, or Alex Summers, in his inner monologue, writing a letter to his daughter Katie in this far-flung future on the planet, on Planet X, which is a mutant utopia far-flung in the future, where Enim of the Apocalypse Twins has rewritten history, and she's now put the blame on the destruction of Earth, or on Armageddon, if you will, on Thor and the Avengers, and Havoc as well. So he's basically writing a letter to her saying that he's going to do the right thing, and he's going to travel back in time and make sure that Planet X doesn't happen, and as a result he needs to actually destroy the planet as well. At the same time, you have both Havoc and the Wasp being pursued by Magneto and his members of X-Force, which are Blob, Pyro, and Toad as well. And the majority of this issue is actually a chase issue, but there's some really great dialogue exchanges between the characters, especially between the Wasp and Havoc. And there's some great just badass lines from Magneto, especially what he does to the buildings and the metal in order to try and catch the two sort of renegades or outlaws, if you will. Just another fantastic issue from Rick Remender in terms of the writing and the storytelling. And there's some great moments, especially when Magneto actually manages to confront Alex over what he's doing, and the fact that everybody on Planet X has got it all wrong, in the respect that, you know, the planet itself is actually built on the grounds of billions of people, especially after the end of the last issue, which, as you know, which was the destruction of Earth, which obviously nobody knows because Ian has managed to rewrite history and convince everyone that it's the Avengers' fault. But there's a really great ending on the last page, which I won't spoil, but it's the culmination of some of the plot threads from issue 14, which a very unlikely and a very untrustworthy ally appears with a way to basically help Havoc to accomplish his goals. But I won't spoil who that is, because I want you guys to pick this up and read it for yourselves. But like I said, another fantastic issue and fantastic writing, storytelling and artwork, which I forgot to mention, Danny Lacuna does his artwork, does his own inking as well as the artwork inside. And last two books, or last two issues anyway of two books, Loki, Agent of Asgard, really good first issue. Al Ewing on the writing, Lee Garbett on the artwork, and Nolan Woodard on the colouring. Which this series focuses on Loki, the half-brother of Thor and the god of Mischief, as he wants to try and turn over a new leaf, and he's now the secret undercover operative of the All-Mother, which are giving him missions from Asgard or Asgardia. Really new reader, well, quite new reader friendly, actually catches everybody up on everything they need to know in order to understand the series, and understand the premise, if you will. And Al Ewing's writing is actually really good, and the script is very well written. It's very clever and it's very sort of witty, and it really befits the character of Loki, especially in some of the scenes where he is confronted by the Avengers, as his first mission is actually to save his half-brother Thor, as he's been infested by this sort of parasite and is making him really act really out of character for the God of Thunder. And there's a really great homage, especially in this one-page spread, of Avengers #1 by Stan Lee and Jack the King Kirby, which is the now sort of old version of Loki, the evil god of mischief, master of all evil version, which is a really great scene where Loki actually uses the power of words and his expertise in telling lies in order to basically get the Avengers to fight amongst themselves, when he manages to travel upstairs to the Avengers database and do what he needs to do, and also to actually save his brother from this parasite that he's been infested with. And as a result, he actually has to stab his own brother through the chest with an enchanted sword, and you actually see the effects of this parasite that it's been having on Thor recently, since he's been inhabited by it, if you will. And there's another really great moment at the end where Thor and Loki actually manage to share a beer and a conversation between the two. And even though they are on again, off again enemies, they are brothers above all. And just a really great introductory issue. As I said, really well written by Al Ewing, really good artwork by Lee Garbett, and colouring by Nolan Woodard. I've been a fan of Lee Garbett since his work on Exo Manowar from Valiant, which is a fantastic series, and I definitely recommend you check that out. And issue 2 of Agent of Asgard, you have Loki actually going on a speed dating evening, and he actually manages to tell the story of a caper by Lorelei, who is the younger sister of Amora the Enchantress. And you have Loki basically telling this tale to this woman Verity, who has the ability, if you will, to detect that somebody's lying to her, even with a few lines. And you'd think, obviously, Loki being the god of mischief and the god of lies, you'd think she'd be able to sort of sniff him out in a few seconds. but it actually seems that Loki's actually telling the truth. And there's some more really great lines from Loki, which are generally funny, especially when the All-Mothers appear in his new apartment and they manage to spill the punch over his new carpet, with some really great dialogue between the two. And there's some really great dialogue exchange between Verity and Loki as well, especially as he forwards the tale to a caper which Lorelei plans to pull off on a casino in France and rob the casino of €1 billion, which has been secured in the most secure vault known to man, apparently. And her sort of thing is to steal the unstealable and then live off the profits, if you will. But you have Loki seemingly confronting Lorelei. Unfortunately, he's not there to fulfill his mission for the All-Mother, in the respect that they want her brought back to Asgardia or Asgard. He actually wants to enlist her help for a caper that he himself is planning, but we don't find out what that is. We just find out that he's planning something at the end of the issue, but not before he turns around to Verity and says, there are people in the world who won't lie to you, you just need to sort of wait, and the right people will come along, which was a really great little fun moment between the two characters. And yeah, just another really good issue of Loki, Agent of Asgard. And finally, She-Hulk #1 and #2. Charles Soule on the writing, Javier Pulido on the artwork, and Munsa Vicente on the colouring. This is the first book of Charles Soule's I've ever read, and my first exposure to She-Hulk in her own title. I know of Jennifer Walters, but I never read her in her own ongoing series. And the first issue, we have Jen basically preparing for her annual review at the Luckberg and Payne law firm where she works, which is her annual bonus for the hours that she's clocked in. Unfortunately, the two owners are being pretty much idiots and screwing Jen out of her annual bonus, and she even sort of rises up and says, no, I'm a fantastic lawyer, you're lucky to have me, and I don't need to take this, so she quits. So then it basically becomes that she is out of a job at the moment, but there's a really great scene where she actually cracks the table, which has been just in store for Madripoor. And if you've read the first arc of Hawkeye by Matt Fraction, Javier Pulido, and David Aja, you'll know that Madripoor is a criminally run country with some pretty shady individuals over there. So the first case, quote-unquote, that She-Hulk actually takes is a case for a lady whose husband has recently passed away, and she's actually attempting to sue Tony Stark, or Iron Man. And there's some really great courtroom scenes, which actually, given that Charles Soule is himself a lawyer or an attorney, there's some really great insight into the courtroom scenes, and it actually adds a lot more it just adds a lot more to the courtroom scene, I think, especially with the dialogue exchange between Tony's legal team, which is just this one guy, and then this parade of lawyers, and then obviously She-Hulk managing to salvage the case, but legal, quote unquote, the guy that handles all of Tony's legal issues, just pulls a trick out of the hat and just basically gets the case temporarily derailed. But then you have She-Hulk doing a bit of investigating on her own and discovering the means to basically have Tony write her client a very large check, and seemingly resolving the case. And there's some great lines from Jen as she gets paid by her client, unwittingly and unknowingly at the end, but she says that 90% of lawyering is actually conversations anyway. But then Jen decides that she's had enough of lawyering, but she's had enough of being a lawyer for a firm, so she's going to strike out on her own and become her own attorney at law, which then segues into issue 2, which we have Jen literally just moved into a new building, and so we have Jen basically waiting for the first client to come through the door, and you have Jen being taken on the building tour by the owner, who is actually a former pupil of the Xavier Institute and a former mutant. But since the events of M-Day, she's gone into hiring out officers to people with superpowers and people involved in legal jobs with superpowers. So you then have Jen interviewing her new secretary, Angie, who has a very creepy looking, or at least in this panel, a creepy looking monkey. But she's a really quite an interesting character and quite odd, but at the same time not being odd as in creepy. She's quite interesting. Unfortunately, Payne and Luckberg, who we saw in the last issue, they've been making Jen's life a little bit difficult because they've been phoning around and saying that, you know, people shouldn't take work or shouldn't go to work with Jen Walters because she's bad news. So they're making her legal life and her job as a lawyer very difficult for her. So then Jen decides to take an early afternoon break, and she has a drink and a catch-up with, with Patsy Walker, aka Hellcat, who is seemingly somebody who doesn't have any powers, but she's quite the drinker, and she's quite agile in terms of what she can do, even though she has no superhuman powers to speak of. But both her and She-Hulk manage to happen upon a AIM laboratory, and they decide to confront a couple of scientists, there's some great action scenes in terms of the two trying to take down this AIM laboratory. But unfortunately, Hellcat gets temporarily captured, but then She-Hulk manages to resolve the problem, and she enlists Patsy to be a investigator to help her on some of her cases. And then at the end you have Jen's first official client appearing on the last page, which is Christoph Vernard, who is the son of Victor Von Doom, aka Dr. Doom, and he wants to basically be granted and given political asylum in the United States.